Hello, everyone. Welcome into today's episode of Weekly Movie Update. We are talking about desperate changes that the Oscars are making to the ceremony. The husband of Halyna Hutchins, who was killed during the Rush tragedy, has spoken out against Alec Baldwin. Coppola has kind of taken on Marvel now with comments of his own, and Disney is creating a neighborhood that just seems a little bit too much. We got a great show for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in to Weekly Movie Update. Probably the bigger news in terms of movie news over the last week, 2 weeks, is the complete desperation that we are seeing from the Oscars. So I'm going to just lay out the changes that have been made over the last 2 weeks and then kind of give a breakdown as to where this is putting everyone in terms of this awards ceremony. So the first piece of news that came out was we will have a host, and they announced that the hosts are going to be Wanda Sykes, Regina Halls, and Amy Schumer. They then announced that there's going to be a section of the ceremony where they will announce the fan favorite movie. Pretty much, you go on Twitter, you have the hashtag of Oscar fan favorite, and people are able to vote 20 times a day, I believe it is. And then during the ceremony, they're going to announce who is the fan favorite. And then the most controversial decision that was made was this week, saying that some of the awards are not going to be broadcast live. And those are documentary short subject, film editing, makeup and hairstyling, the original score, production design, short film animated, short film live action, and sound. Now, in interest of being just very exact with this, we are still going to see all of these awards handed out, announced, and we are going to still hear sections of the speeches of the winners. What this is doing is that an hour before the show, these awards will be announced, they will be taped, and then they will be inserted into the broadcast, but those awards will not be announced live. And also, they have said that they're not going to be shortening the ceremony. It will still be the same length ceremony, and they will be filling up the ceremony with other things. I would assume it would be like comedic bits and songs, presentations, kind of like hopefully, I think, showstopper types of material. So, getting into more of the analysis of this, first of all, I feel like the first point to say here is that I think that it is very easy to criticize changes that are made. It's very easy to do that, but I do think that there need to be changes. I'm not saying that these are them. I'm not saying that these would achieve the goals that the Oscars probably need to achieve right now. The first point that the thing that I get frustrated with in this type of discourse online and in articles and commentary that's put out is that there is a cycle of denial, cynicism, I think, within the industry about these award shows. And I think to kind of start talking about this is kind of like, how did we get here, and why are these things actually happening? Why are all of these changes being made? Normally, in terms of people that actually talk about this for their job, you normally either hear the denial aspect of there not being a problem and why would we talk about this, which I was surprised no one was making the connection back whenever things were going wrong with the Golden Globes, to say things like, well, what's going to happen with the Oscars? It was very rare that anybody would say anything about the Oscars being in a bit of trouble and we need to do something about it. There's one article that I could find that even mentioned the fact that the Oscars had to give ABC $12 million back because they reopened negotiations and they pretty much said that this award show is devaluing, so you need to give some of this money back. And so that's on one side, which is just a level of denial. And then you have just a level of cynicism towards the idea of anything needing to change about these award shows. Pretty much a way of saying, it doesn't matter if there's no audience. It doesn't matter if no one watches this. If people like Spider-Man and they want to see Spider-Man win, then those people can die in a ditch for all we care. We don't want them watching the Oscars. It doesn't matter. And this was actually an article from Vulture that was pretty much saying the Oscars need to stop their self-loathing that I wanted to point to that I think kind of points this out. One point they made in this article, they say if the Oscars have continued to fall in viewership, that is not because of anything the Oscars themselves have done or not done. The audience for live TV in general has been declining for decades now. So on that first point, I think that it's a bit of a non-starter to just admit defeat by saying that viewership on TV is declining all over the place, so therefore we should not care. First of all, you're the entertainment industry. I can't speak to what happens at the Grammys, at the Emmys, or those types of award shows, or the Tony Awards, because I don't know the ins and outs so much, and I haven't even really watched those ceremonies. I've watched the Oscars for a long time. I've taken a lot of interest in what's going on with those various award shows, the changes that have happened that can coincide with what is actually going on in the decline. And I think the biggest decline in terms of what has caused the audience to leave, I think, does actually lay at the feet of what the Oscars have done. I think that the Oscar viewership has, over the last 8 years, gotten the audience accustomed that whenever you watch these awards for 3 hours and you stay for the biggest award of the night, which is Best Picture, you are going to see a movie win Best Picture of the year that you have either not heard of, have heard of, but is not playing anywhere near you, and then, yes, most importantly, you have more than likely not seen. Now, this is not some big controversial thing to say that after 5 years of investing that much time in watching a movie award show, you are going to alienate a lot of just regular moviegoers. A lot of the people in my family, like I will talk people in my family their ear off about movie news to a degree that they don't care about, but they love movies. And they still watch the Oscars, and they've watched it through year after year after year of being like, what are these movies? I haven't heard of a lot of this stuff that's going on. Is Parasite worth it? And you know what? There's a lot of movies that are nominated and win that I would say are still good, but there's still a bit of denial in terms of if you give Best Picture in particular to people who were staying up until like 11 o'clock at night to watch these award shows and they haven't seen it, then it would be like watching the Super Bowl and then at the last second a team wins that we were all like the Jets win at the end of the Super Bowl. They weren't even doing well. No one really cares. Maybe they have some merit. Maybe there's history and all that stuff, but that it misses the point to give movies Best Picture that no one has heard of. And that then means after 3 years, you'll lose some people. 6 years of doing that, 8 years of doing that, people will just be like, we'll do something else that night. And you lose the audience by doing that. And the things that I hear a lot whenever bringing this up are, so we should just give Oscars to movies that are just really, really popular. You just want to give it to Spider-Man. Just give Marvel movies. Just look at give it to Rampage, whatever action dumb movie The Rock is in. We should just give it to him. That's what you think we should do. What? That's cheap. That's not what the Oscars are about. If we just gave movie awards to things that make a lot of money, then that makes the Oscars pointless, and it makes it so that we shouldn't even care about the integrity. These awards will have no integrity if we do that. And I understand that point. I do not think that we should just look at what is the most popular. I, in fact, think, and this is what I said in the review that I did of Moonlight, which I'll link here, if you take the movies that are nominated for Best Picture, and then you pick the one that is the most popular of that list, I'm talking about things like A Star is Born, I'm talking about Black Panther, Mad Max Fury Road, things that people are really going to see and that the Academy has acknowledged, things like Gravity, and the Academy has actually said by nominating it, this is a really high-powered quality movie, then give that the Best Picture. And you know what? It would be great if we were in the time where we're giving things like Lord of the Rings, and we're giving things like Braveheart and Titanic, and year after year there's a synchronicity between the audience and the entertainment industry being in lockstep with giving awards to things that are great and things that everyone's watching. And then you get to 2010 and you give it to The Hurt Locker. And not a lot of people saw Hurt Locker, but there's an understanding that every now and then we're going to give this to a lesser-known movie to kind of boost its profile. But if you do that for 8 years, people aren't going to stick around because they don't even know what this conversation is about. They're not in the conversation. So I don't like this little snippet, the thing like the Oscars haven't done anything wrong. It's not to say they haven't done anything wrong, they just haven't been entertaining anyone. Another point that this article went on to make was to start going around willy-nilly, I guess this was the point that I just combated by bringing it up, to start going around willy-nilly nominating whatever hit has caught the industry's attention that year wouldn't just be counterproductive to the Academy's reason for existing. And I don't think that's what anyone is arguing. Nobody is saying that at the end of the year, you just look at the box office numbers, give it to whatever's at the top. I think that the better way to look at this is acknowledging that there's a bit of a problem. No one is watching these awards. These awards actually cost money to produce. Also, if a movie has a level of, if people are showing up to watch in the 55 million number that it used to, if the audience is that big, that's what makes the Oscars glamorous. Everyone in the country, tons of people around the world tuning in to watch this event is what makes it glamorous. When those people disappear, the awards are no longer glamorous. So to stick around and say, well, screw those people that aren't showing up, it not only sounds cynical and like you're in denial about how the business of this actually works. It also seems like there is it honestly feels like hatred towards the audience and the lack of recognition in that you actually need a big audience to make awards exciting feels upsetting, because if we continue going down the way of talking about that, then it's just going to make the whole thing collapse in itself. It already is. We might just be seeing the whole thing collapse in itself, and that's just terrible. Like, Hollywood did not lose the audience overnight, and they're not going to get them back overnight. So getting back more to like what's going on with these changes, I think everyone needs to be open to the idea of changes, and they need to articulate that. Yes, people on Twitter need to articulate that. More importantly, people like The Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, people that can actually push the narrative need to start talking more about how there needs to be changes and suggesting what changes are. Because if you just have this non-conversation about how, oh, the Oscars are fine, we shouldn't change anything, or there's nothing actually wrong, or the Oscars do nothing that is upsetting people, it's just people and they're leaving and no one should care, then that means that the people that actually see the numbers, ABC, the Academy, they're actually going to eventually then come out and say, no, we actually need people back, and y'all aren't talking about any changes. There is no conversation about changes, so we're just going to change things because we need to. And it creates the problem that we have now, which is no one in the industry talks about how the awards need to change. So there's no conversation of ideas. There's nothing to pull from. There's just a desert of conversation. And then change actually needs to happen because we don't want the awards to die. So the people in control of the awards, they just make changes. They announce changes. And then those ideas suck. Everyone's upset with the ideas, and you need to have a conversation going on, which means you have to admit that there's a problem. If there's no admitting that there's a problem and that you need to get an audience, then this cycle is just going to continue happening, and this is probably just how we see the Oscars collapsing in on themselves. That's probably just what that means. But you also can't blame the Academy and ABC for doing something. Like, the worst thing would be to do nothing and to just continue to let them sink, because if they sink, then they'll go the way of the Golden Globes, and that was so embarrassing. Failure for an award show this big is going to be really, really bad. So saying that it's, I don't think, the fault of the Academy to make changes, because you have to make changes. I think that in a large way, the people that are in the industry are a lot at fault for not suggesting changes and interacting with the audience. You can't just blame an industry for doing something, because you have to do something, because you clearly are not doing well. So actually looking at what they did. First of all, the hosts. Now, I think that it is probably a better idea to have hosts than not. Hosts, whenever they do their job, actually either badly or when they do their job well, they are a large part of the conversation. So I think it's a good idea to bring hosts back. I'm surprised that they put Regina King in as a host, particularly because if you choose 3 people and 2 of them are comedians, it seems odd to put one person that isn't a comedian. Not really a huge, I'm not upset about that at all. That just seemed strange. To choose Amy Schumer, though, personally, I hate Amy Schumer. I don't find her funny at all. I don't really find just flat out crude humor to be all that engaging. I feel like you'll normally get like a laugh out of it, but it's not really that interesting. Wanda Sykes, honestly, does a much better job. I really like her humor, and she brings up uncomfortable stuff, but does so in a way where everyone ends up laughing at themselves. So I think she's really good. I think Amy Schumer really sucks, and she actually, not only is, I feel, her comedy not really that funny, it's also incredibly divisive, which is honestly the better part of her comedy, but also I don't know if that's really the thing that you want here, especially because everyone knows she's divisive. So if people are interested in the Oscars, they're not going to be interested about a divisive comedian. And she's also she brings that thing that you know that everyone hates about the Oscars, even people that watch, is the politics. That's going to be a recipe for disaster by putting her in this. Then the option of putting the category for fans to vote. I don't think connecting this with Twitter is a very good idea, because Twitter doesn't normally... they may talk about movies a lot, but they don't really talk about movies at a very high level of conversation. I feel like there are several million people that no longer watch the Oscars but want the Oscars to be better. I feel like it would have been better to announce that they can go to the Academy's website and enter in the movie that they would want. Like, actually give an extra step for people to take part in order to go and contribute instead of just on Twitter. Twitter's a little bit too top of mind right at the moment, and they let people vote 20 times a day. That's just that's a little too much. But I feel like it's still a good idea to try and get people involved. I'm not upset with that one. I like the idea of getting people to contribute a bit more, particularly because you're not going to get the audience back overnight. You do need to make, I think you've gone so long of pissing the audience off, you need to make some big steps that are going to risk offending the people that are more elite about this, which is, no, this is only for insiders. No one is allowed to contribute to this. However, they should watch because that's how we get money. So they should contribute with their eyes, but that's about it. Little elite to kind of think that. So I think with how bad the Oscars have been in contributing to catering to the audience, asking them now to come and contribute, I don't think is the worst thing. The one that is very controversial right now is not broadcasting those, I believe it was 8 categories that I had mentioned. Yeah, and those categories were short documentary, film editing, makeup and hairstyling, original score, production design, short film animated, short film, live action, and sound. I understand, obviously, why people are upset about that. I feel like going into that discussion, I'm a little bit more confused why being upset, since we're going to see everyone accept their Oscar. We're going to see all awards be announced, and we are going to see their speeches still. So I don't think that is a terrible idea. If they were cutting them, if what they said is, no, we're cutting it out, we'll do it like they said a few years ago, we're cutting cinematography, it'll be announced during the commercials and you'll find out on Twitter. Like, if that's what they were doing, then it's like, no. If people are receiving, accepting, and giving their speech and that's broadcast live, that does not upset me at all. What does upset me is that they're doing this and they're not shortening the length of the show. And this is another thing people say, oh, the show got 55 million views whenever it was 3 hours long. It's like, yeah, but times have actually changed, and you can't be 3 hours long. If this show could be done in 2 hours, 15 minutes, I feel like in the world we live in now, that would be fantastic. But to cut down on these awards that people are receiving and not lessening the show, like you're actually cutting these down, keeping the show the same length, and you're just going to fill it with like a bunch of comedic bits, that is the point where I think it becomes disrespectful. I would be totally on board with this if we're lessening the runtime of the entire show. To not lessen the runtime, cut into the time that they get for their recognition, and then fill that with jokes, I feel like it misses the mark in terms of what the audience actually wants. It misses the mark with the people that you're representing. So I think that this in that retrospect, I think is a bad idea. I actually think it'd be better if we lessened the show. Hey, cut even more awards in terms of like pre-record more of the show and make it a much more exciting show by cutting the length and not having to have all of the fluff in between someone coming on stage. Shorten the speeches. Everyone gets pissed at all of these political speeches. Cut all of that down, but actually try and make the show better by doing that. It feels like they weren't trying to make the show better by doing this. So I don't know if the ins and outs of the contract meant that they had to keep the same length, but overall, bad idea. Not because you're shortening things, just overall, I think a bad idea. Last thing I'll say about this. Originally, the Oscars were about giving awards to the highest performers in the industry. And back whenever the Academy Awards started, that meant that you had to be excellent in terms of telling incredible stories cinematically, and you needed an audience. These awards were for things like Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia, which on their own were great movies. And on top of that, they actually pulled in a massive audience. There is no way that something like Gone with the Wind would have gotten the celebration it had at the Oscars if no audience showed up for it. If no audience showed up, it would have been a flop, it would have been embarrassing, and it wouldn't have been seen as worthy of being part of the conversation in the Academy. It seems like now we have shifted to being a much more elite type of feeling where it doesn't even matter if people are watching these movies, which betrays the concept of what the Academy Awards started the Oscars for. It is totally disregarding the audience, and I think that they actually need to give suggestions about how to get the audience back. If you don't give suggestions, then they're just going to try shit. And if they're just going to try shit, it's going to make everyone upset. So just try a little harder in terms of contributing, getting the audience to be part of the conversation. I think that just means giving Best Picture to movies that people are actually watching. I think that's the answer. Okay, moving on now to the Alec Baldwin saga, the Halyna Hutchins saga. So the big story now is that the husband of Halyna Hutchins has come out in an interview where he says that he blames Alec Baldwin for the shooting. So this is on an interview with NBC. So kind of like in the last video that I did, I'm just going to go down kind of the points of what is given with this information and then kind of analyze where it's fitting in with the whole conversation of what's been going on. So they start off the interview talking about how Matt and Halyna met, how they got engaged after 3 months of knowing each other. It's a very sweet moment. And it's really, really sad. You can really tell that the two of them were deeply in love, and it's really it underscores the part that I think is becoming more and more sad as this story unfolds, which is how Alec Baldwin has made this so much about him, and so much about him that it totally overshadows the tragedy of what happens. And I do hope that if this does go to trial, eventually we get past this and it does just kind of end on a note of, honestly, no sadness of what the situation resulted in, which was the loss of someone's life. So it was a sweet moment seeing a bit of their story. Matt says that he still wears her engagement ring ever since the tragedy took place. They show multiple photos of them as a family with her 9-year-old son, Andros, and very, very sweet family. And it drives home how tragic this whole situation is. And then they get into talking about the actual day, the timeline of what happened that day. Matt says that he got a call from a member of the production team just saying that she had been shot and taken to the hospital. He then picked up his son and told him, because at the time that he then went and got his son, he found out that she had passed away. And now he had to tell his son multiple times what had happened because he didn't believe him. They then went to Santa Fe and met Alec Baldwin. And I feel like there's also a bit of, just to step outside this for a second, there's a bit of a feeling that I'm getting in the more that I talk about this, the more that I see other people talk about this, that to mention or talk about Alec Baldwin is seen as clickbait. I kind of resent that a bit, because this story is absolutely tragic, very, very sad, and it's a very strange thing because it is centering around a very, very powerful character in this industry. And they're acting very, very belligerently, arrogantly, and in a way that I think addresses why it is so many people are pissed off with this industry when you talk about why people are pissed off with this industry. And Alec Baldwin has done so much politicizing, so much victimization of himself, and that it is touching a very serious nerve. And I think that it's important to keep a very close eye on how it is that he is dealing with this and how everyone else in the industry is dealing with this. Because if you look, there's a very high chance that he is going to walk away from this scot-free. And if that happens, then it needs to have happened in the context of people giving him as much shit as possible, because he is very powerful, and it is very possible that he could just walk away from this unscathed, which, if he walks out of it unscathed, is, I think, also a huge tragedy in this entire situation. So then this is getting into the actual interview, because they get back and forth with how it actually went on the day whenever him and his son met Alec Baldwin. So the interviewer asks, "You met Alec Baldwin and there was an embrace. Tell me what that was like." Matt then says, "To understand that moment, I think you have to understand the emotions. I was just looking through a way through the storm." The interviewer then says that he seemed distraught. Matt then says there was a lot of emotions on both sides. It also comes out later that Matt is actually a lawyer himself. So I feel like keeping this, I guess, vague is probably a good idea, because obviously on the day of it was very, very emotional. And you can also tell that on the day, Alec Baldwin has used a lot of the information that was said on that day as a way of saying that he did nothing wrong, because obviously in the moment there was, it seems, tons of compassion going around. So I think that the amount of time that's between the day and now to actually make it very clear on that day, emotions were very high. Not everyone was in a critical space to talk about what's actually going on. I think that's important, because there's been a lot of discounting from Alec Baldwin and the producers to say, hey, on the day, no one was saying it was our fault, so therefore it isn't our fault. I think for people that are actually on the prosecution to say, I think we need to understand that in a situation like that, people are in shock. You can't actually use what's said on the day to vindicate everything else when we're actually seeing the facts in the cold light of day. So I think that's a good idea there. Then, in terms of actually talking about the lawsuit, they say that Matt Hutchins has filed a lawsuit against Baldwin and other producers and crew members on the film, now expressing outrage with Baldwin's recent interview where he says, quote, "The actor shifted blame over the death of his wife, Halyna." And getting into this point is where I'll say kind of what I've been saying in each of these videos is that I think that the fact that Alec Baldwin decided to go and do that interview with ABC changed pretty much everything, because if he had not done that and had pretty much taken I'm going to stay quiet, I'm, a notable person, I'm just going to deal with this quietly out of respect, then I think that would have been the least controversial way to go about doing this, and it would have shown a lot of respect. To go about it like this, not only has he been saying things that show a lack of disrespect, it seems like just a lack of connection to reality, which is angering people because it totally overshadows the event. So what he then said about this, what they played a quote from Baldwin where he had said, "I feel that someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but it is definitely not me." It then goes to Matt, and Matt says, "Watching that made me angry. Just so angry hearing him talk about her death so publicly in such a detailed way, and then accepting no responsibility after essentially describing killing her." And I do think that actually, I'll comment on after going through, because the interviewer then after this says he said that he felt grief but no guilt. Matt then says, "It almost sounds like he was the victim, and hearing him blame Halyna in the interview and shift responsibility to others and seeing him cry about it, I just feel like, are we really supposed to feel bad about you here, Mr. Baldwin?" The interviewer then says, "Do you think that the majority of the blame lies with Alec Baldwin?" Matt then goes on to make the point that most people in the really high up legacy corporate media don't make about this, which is the idea that the person holding the gun causing it to discharge is not responsible is absurd to me. Every individual that touches a firearm has a responsibility for gun safety, but gun safety was not the only problem on that set. There were a number of industry standards that were not practiced. There was a culture of cost cutting that led to Halyna's death. And then it then cuts to the attorney's statement that says any claim that Alec Baldwin was reckless is entirely false. It then goes back to Matt, who ends with saying, "With the lawsuit, we're looking for justice in many ways, looking to hold accountable people responsible for Halyna's death, which was totally preventable. In the end, justice is not going to bring Halyna back, but the memory of this can keep people safe in the future." And then it cuts to after the interview where the hosts are all talking about it. It then goes on to say that her family is actually all in Ukraine right now. She's from Ukraine, which makes this whole story even sadder. Matt then says that he actually lost a parent during the COVID pandemic. And they reiterate the anger that he feels towards Alec Baldwin. He says, yes, that he is an attorney and wants justice for everyone involved, but towards Alec Baldwin specifically. And then someone in commentary says that he was very measured, but it was very clear that he had a message going on. I think Alec Baldwin's behavior in the aftermath of the tragedy is what has defined the story. He's made this a story about his hubris, his ego, his power. I think it's shameful because it has taken away from the actual victims of the story. This could have been a story that we no longer had any reason to talk about after a week. Could have been a story about a victim, remembering her, the work that she had done. They've created foundations in her name. It could have so easily no longer been a story, but it actively is, and the person that is actively making it about that is Alec Baldwin, from everything that he says, from just the hubris of saying that he bears no responsibility. And that's what this addition to the story is pretty much showing, that Matt Hutchins is very, very angry because of Alec Baldwin, because he's made the entire story about him. It has overshadowed his deceased wife, and now because Alec Baldwin has taken so many steps to say that he bears no responsibility, and because he is so powerful enough to actually overshadow the entire story, justice now means actively making him pay for that level of hubris. I mean, this is a story about a hugely powerful man in the film industry, and also Alec Baldwin, his family came over on the Mayflower. So we're talking about someone who has got institutional power, generational power, industry power, and this is a very controversial figure who has now stepped in shit, and how he comes out of it is a huge part of this whole weird culture war thing that Hollywood pisses people off about. Alec Baldwin represents the film industry, represents to a large degree the elites, and the point in that is that if he had apologized from the very beginning of this and stayed silent, and if he had seemed like there was a level of humility, this would be a totally different story. I think you would have to admit that if he had come out as being wrong from the beginning, he could have even come out of this with more goodwill than he might have even had before any of this actually happened. But that didn't happen, and any goodwill that could have been there is totally sour and is becoming so much worse. And as they point out in this story, there are not even criminal charges that have been announced by the DA. And as the DA even said, they were getting very impatient with Alec Baldwin because he continued to talk, continued to press investigators on what they should be looking for. And I think the goodwill that was there whenever the emotions of the day were high from the DA, and the DA has said that they gave Alec Baldwin a lot of leeway on that day. If that is no longer there, then there could actually be criminal charges coming. And I have no idea when that would be, but they have to be coming at some point. And I think that that's the other thing. There could have been no criminal charges for him if he had not inflamed everyone about this story. Trying to push the spotlight off of him has made it about him completely. And it's a story about power, financial power, cultural power, and it represents the film industry entirely. And because Alec Baldwin has been so vocal on so many things, it makes this story really, really toxic and just a very hot story to follow and an important one to follow. So subscribe to 5 Minute Critic. We give updates on the Alec Baldwin story regularly. Going on now, less controversial of a topic. Well, you know what, actually, maybe not. Maybe not as essential a controversial topic. Francis Ford Coppola has joined the ranks of the rest of the older generation of filmmakers coming out against Marvel, saying all Marvel movies are the same, and actually then saying that you can interchange movies like No Time to Die and Dune, because they structure themselves very much the same way that Marvel movies do. And I think that on a level, I get it. We're talking about an older filmmaker who had a lot of success in the studio system whenever the studio system was very, very different. And first of all, I am so bored with the people that say, oh my God, Francis Ford Coppola is a master. We should respect what he has to say. I think we should respect Francis Ford Coppola by continuing to watch his movies for generations and generations and celebrating them with re-releases and giving money to all of the great endeavors that he does. I don't think that means that we have to fan whatever flame he wants to fart on, because his opinions do not actually always amount up to being essential to what is actually going on in the film industry. Francis Ford Coppola hasn't made a good movie in decades. He's not a very good filmmaker anymore, and I don't think that it's a good idea to take statements like this as if they are fact, because I don't think that it's a good idea to view the film industry this way, because it is just bitching about what's going on. I think that if you're going to take someone's comments seriously about what's going on in movies, first of all, if Martin Scorsese wants to say what he wants to say about Marvel movies, he has every right to be taken seriously about it, because he is actively contributing to cinema right now in a way that is both engaging and also at a very high quality level. So I think that it's important to listen to what he has to say. I'm fine hearing what Francis Ford Coppola has to say. Sure, it's interesting. But if you're not going to actually make any comments about how you think the movies should be progressing forward and you just want to complain about them, then I think that they should just register at the level of complaining, especially if you're not making anything good anymore. And I know that he's going to make Megalopolis. I'm going to put my cards down and say that I don't think that movie is going to be any good at all. No one wants to finance it. He wants to self-finance it, fine. But that just, means Francis Ford Coppola does what he does a lot, which is behave brashly, and then it end up not working out. It sometimes does work out, but it's also not 1980 anymore. I think that It's much better to listen to people who talk about the future of movies or the current state of the film industry. I really liked what Ben Affleck had to say a few weeks ago whenever he was talking about how movies need to see how TV filled the void that they stopped paying attention to. They no longer had new, original, complex characters with complex stories that talked about everyday types of things that people actually go through. They went too high concept for too long with information in movies that were aimed a little bit too young. TV then came in, filled the void, and movies need to do a better job at getting back to that. I think he did a great job talking about that, and it even addresses things that are wrong with Marvel. I still think that people like Francis Ford Coppola should obviously be respected. They make good movies, but respecting them means enjoying their movies, talking about how great their movies are. It does not mean whenever they speak, especially about what needs to be happening in the industry, that we should take it wholly seriously. He isn't even talking about how we should change anything in the industry. He's just complaining. So if we want to say old man complains, we can say, I think this story is about nothing more than an old man complaining. Okay, and then finally, we're going to start with a very disturbing story. Disney World is creating, or I guess just Disney, is creating a neighborhood. They're creating what seems like a small town. Here's a quote talking about what's going down here. The Walt Disney Company today announced plans to introduce Story Living by Disney, a vibrant new neighborhoods that are infused with their company's special brand of magic. These master plan communities are intended to inspire residents to foster new friendships, pursue their interests, and write the next exciting chapter in their lives. It's called Cotino, and they're going to have neighborhoods for people of all ages, including a retirement community. And this is essentially, you walk into Disney World and you essentially live in Disney World. There will be shops where you'll go to and it will look like Disney. There will be characters greeting you at most places that you go to in the neighborhoods, and it will all be themed as Disney characters. It's essentially the original Epcot idea that Disney had, which, if you don't know, Epcot stands for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. Walt Disney wanted to create essentially a town of Disney where people worked and had jobs where they worked with at Disney, and then they went to their homes and everything looked and felt like Disney World. And it was a place where, famously, he was saying you don't actually own anything there, you're actually renting forever. And you kind of, it's like that movie Sorry to Bother You, where you kind of live where you work, but you're so in love with the world of where you work that it's, it's Disney. It's weird. I feel like this is a scary idea. I get it. We all love to, immerse ourselves in these worlds. Universal's awesome. Disney's awesome. There's a sickly side of it, though. I know that everyone knows the people that are in love with Disney to a very, very intense degree. And whatever. This freaks me out. This really freaks me out. I feel like it's a very scary idea. If there's anything good to come of this, I really don't know. But leave your thoughts and comments on this story about all the stories that we've talked about today. This one seems a little dystopian to me. It seems a little bit dystopian there. Sure, I'll probably drive by it to see what's going on, but to actually live in Disney forever just seems a bit strange. Anyway, that is the show for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Leave all comments below about thoughts on stories or other stories you think we should be addressing here. And as always, please subscribe to 5 Minute Critic for future updates on reviews and movie news.